Representative Jim Struzzi joining us this morning, courtesy of Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Todd. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you back with us here today. A couple of pieces of legislation you introduced last week. First of all, I want to talk about the Behavioral Health Efficiency Resolution you introduced. What is that all about?
Well, essentially, about a year ago, I introduced House Resolution 268, which basically commissioned the Joint State Government Commission to do a study on our behavioral health care capacity across the Commonwealth. There's a lot of concerns with people with behavioral health issues and how they are treated here in our medical system currently because essentially, Todd, we don't have the capacity to fully treat behavioral health patients as we should. And I saw some of that firsthand here locally, and I'm sure you've heard stories of this where people are in the emergency room and they end up staying in the emergency room because we simply don't have additional facilities or capabilities to put them and place them where they belong to get appropriate treatment. So this study, as I said, commissioned by my House resolution, using the Joint State Government Commission, compiled a group of medical professionals from all over the Commonwealth. They met regularly, expressed their concerns. I know I got some feedback here from some of our local medical professionals in the field, and then they came up with about a 104-page report that outlines some recommendations and basically spells out what's not right, what we need to fix, and then this in turn will allow us to hopefully pass some effective legislation to help our medical professionals deal better with behavioral health treatment capacities and also, of course, help those patients that desperately need that help.
We look at some of the factors involved in this problem, and number one is there just aren't enough medical professionals who are concentrating on this, are there?
And that was one of the things that they found, not enough psychiatric treatment professionals here in some of our rural areas and essentially across the Commonwealth. And it's becoming an increasingly larger issue. And I think, compound that with a lot of the mental health issues that we're going to have because of the COVID pandemic and the struggles that people are going through right now, the anxiety, the fear, the loss of jobs, the closings of businesses. And I think, and I did participate in a Human Services Committee hearing last week on this subject. They're really concerned with the downstream effects, if you will, even years to come from now from the mental health issues that are going to arise from this. And so it's now more than ever vitally important that we make sure that we have the capability to address behavioral and mental health issues.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Puts hospitals in a really tough position, doesn't it?
And it's an expense, Todd. When they have to house patients that probably shouldn't be there, it's an extreme expense to them. And part of the problem is they simply have nowhere to send these people, and they can't turn them away. And I've seen this firsthand over at Indiana Regional Medical Center. There's patients that are basically living in the emergency room or living on floors where they shouldn't be living because they have nowhere else to go. And we need to fix those gaps. We need to help those patients, and we need to help our medical system because there are undue costs associated with housing those patients. And the bottom line, they're not getting the treatment that they need, and it's straining our additional healthcare services.
Couple of environmental issues to deal with as well. Legislation you introduced last week to help businesses promote environmental compliance. It seems like a really good idea because you think of businesses, they're in business to do their business, and they might not even be aware of all the regulation that they face.
I think one of the burdens that we place on small businesses and businesses in general are excessive regulations. And I've heard that firsthand from a number of business groups. And it's one of the reasons that businesses choose to locate outside of this Commonwealth is our excessive regulations, the red tape they have to go through just to establish and be successful as a business. So I introduced House Bill 2742, Todd. And that would essentially create the Office of Compliance Assistance and Pollution Prevention within the Department of Environmental Protection. Now, I have had some people reach out to me that say, why are you growing government? I don't think this is growing government. This is making government better. This is making government work for the people. A lot of times, these businesses don't even realize that they need to comply with environmental regulations or what they need to do to adhere to those regulations. And then they find themselves strapped with enormous fees, and a lot of times that's enough to put them out of business. And let's not beat around the bush, Todd. The DEP counts those fee collections as part of their budget. And they're not out there to help businesses. They're out there to protect the environment. If we could do both of those at the same time by preventing the initial problem, that would help the environment, that would prevent pollution, and that would also help these businesses be successful. And that's what we really need. At a time like this, where businesses are struggling, the last thing we need to do is to come in and hammer them on issues that we can help them fix in the first place. So I think it's really a win-win. It'll help small businesses grow. It'll help protect the environment, and it'll really keep businesses here and grow jobs. So I'm real excited to introduce that legislation, and it did get the support of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry because they realize the same problems that these small businesses face. And if we can help them navigate through that without facing harsh penalties and fines, I think it's a good thing.
Last month as well, the House passed your bill to ensure that the legislature gets a say in the regulations that the governor wants to impose on Pennsylvania. The governor's already said, if it gets to me, I'm vetoing it. Tell me about its progress.
Well, it's very unfortunate. I am excited that the bill, House Bill 2025, did pass with bipartisan support. A large majority of my House colleagues voted in favor of it because they realize that we should have a say in this process, and we have been excluded from this process from the beginning. And even though now 3 DEP advisory councils have voted to not move RGGI forward, the governor and the DEP continue to push for RGGI to be implemented. Across the board, across the Commonwealth, we have heard from numerous organizations, not just environmental organizations, not just business organizations, but across the board, people don't want to see this implemented in Pennsylvania because they know it's going to be bad for our economy, it's going to be bad for our jobs, and it's really not going to do anything to impact global climate change. So you have to ask yourself, why are we doing this? And I think that's the question that needs to be asked. And before we continue down this path, I hope that House Bill 2025 gets some traction. I think it's unfortunate that the governor would choose to veto a bill that had bipartisan support in the House. And truly, as I've said before, Todd, that shows that he's simply not listening to the voice of the people. And we're elected to be that voice. And if you choose to ignore us, you're ignoring the people of Pennsylvania. And I'm very, very fearful of what might happen to our local economy here in Western Pennsylvania if RGGI should be implemented. Because I've participated in numerous hearings. In fact, the Environmental Resource and Energy Committee in the House just had another hearing on it about a week and a half ago. Again, professionals from all sides of the issue said that RGGI is not good for Pennsylvania. It's not going to do anything substantial to impact climate change. So why are we doing this? I
don't know that it's right or wrong to tie these two issues together, but one of your colleagues raising questions about a contract with a consultant to DEP and what that consultant has advocated in the past in favor of RGGI, and he's supposed to be consulting in a non-biased way. And then the governor and the Sunshine Act legislation that passed unanimously, and he did not sign it and allowed it to become law without his signature because he knew it would be overridden. But I don't know that those two issues can be connected, but should they?
Well, I think they are on a larger scale, Todd, because what people want is transparent government. They want to know why decisions are being made. They want to know what's happening behind the scenes. They want to know how their taxpayer dollars are being spent. And I've been a big advocate for that since I took office and even before, because we're accountable to the people of Pennsylvania, we in the General Assembly and the governor. And if they can't see what's happening behind the scenes, if they can't have access to those records and that information, then we are not being transparent, and we need to be. So I'm glad that the governor did not veto that bill. I think it's important as we assess what happened during this pandemic, why some decisions were made. When we look for accountability, and we also look for towards the future to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again, where we have some of these decisions that were made that put people in a worse position than they would have been if it wasn't for the COVID crisis. So I think it's important that we do allow that access, that we do allow that transparency, and I think the two issues are connected because as I just mentioned, why are we entering into RGGI? What is the benefit for Pennsylvania? And no one can really answer that.
All right, so in Harrisburg this week, folks have been hard at work, much of it, almost all of it having to do with COVID-19. But what are some of the things that have stood out for you this week?
Well, I was here in the district this week, but I did watch via live stream the 2 education hearings that were held on getting students back to school. And I had previously written a letter to the Secretary of Education, Pedro Rivera, basically expressing many of the concerns that were voiced to our office from our superintendents, our school board members, teachers, et cetera, from around the 62nd district. So we compiled all those concerns into a letter and sent it to the Secretary of Education, basically asking for additional guidance, additional clarification. And I was happy, as part of those hearings this week, to hear a lot of those questions being asked as well by the School Board Association and a number of school administrators during those hearings. We do have to get answers for them. I think it's important that we get our kids back to school, but I think it's important that we do it safely, both for the teachers, the faculty, the administrators, and the students. And as we move forward, I think that we do need further clarification on how that should occur. And I think we do need more of a universal approach to getting kids back to school.
Mr. Rivera announcing this week that he's leaving the administration and leaving government. Does that concern you with the Department of Education leadership?
Well, it certainly does, and it makes you scratch your head a little bit as someone would leave during a time of crisis like this. I'm sure he's under a lot of pressure, as we all are, to find answers and do the right thing. And I think that at the end of the day, Todd, that's what we all want to do, is make the right choices and decisions to help the people that we represent. I wish him good luck. I thought he was a good Secretary of Education. I had met with him several times, and he was very responsive, answered all of our questions, and tried to be as helpful as possible. And I know that he was here in Indiana just last year. We toured a few of our school facilities.
All right, so let's go into the next couple of weeks and maybe finish out the month of August. We look at the start of school for IUP, for our public schools, and all of these school boards with great decisions to make. What do you see legislatively happening in Harrisburg in the course of the next month?
Well, we expect to be back later this month. We have a couple of bills that we need to pass to fix some of the concerns that were raised during the spring primary elections with mail-in balloting and things like that. So we're going to be addressing those types of things. We still have some issues that relate to the COVID crisis that we have to resolve, and then get back to normal business, I hope, in the fall. I have a couple of bills that passed out of the House that I would like to see move through the Senate and hopefully get to the governor's desk this session. Two in particular, Cody's law that would provide additional protections for disabled people so that they are not assaulted because of their condition, and also the firefighters' tuition assistance bill that passed last year, I believe. Those two bills I'd like to see move forward and get signed into law before we end this session this fall. But there's always a lot of work to do, always a lot of questions to be asked. Our offices continue to be inundated with calls from people trying to navigate the unemployment compensation system. And I should note, Todd, there is a hearing next week with the Labor and Industry Committee on the unemployment compensation system. So I'd encourage people, you can tune into all those. They're live streamed, and I believe they're also on PCN, and we'll have some information on my website and Facebook page. But we continue to try and move forward, trying to make the right decisions for people related to the COVID crisis, to get people back to work, to get people back to normal, to get our restaurants fully reopened. A lot of people out there are continuing to struggle, and I'm deeply concerned for people's well-being right now.
He is State Representative Jim Struzzi. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, 101.1 FM and AM 1160 and